In our study of printing, I'm going to start by looking at the GUI interfaces, some of the GUI interfaces that we have available in printing. Then we'll kind of go under the hood and look at some of the subsystems, and we'll look at strategic locations in the file system where we need to understand what is there and why it's there. So let's begin by, I'm using Windows 10. I'm going to go to Control Panel, and most of us are comfortable. If you've been using Windows 8, Windows 7 for a while, you have a devices and printers. And this is now where Microsoft puts a lot of stuff. It used to be just printers. Now they've kind of thrown in other devices. You can see I have a USB device. I have a microphone, which I'm using right now. Here's a Logitech receiver transmitter for my keyboard. So you can see a lot of other things besides printers, but we're going to focus on printers. So here's my brother. And you see I've got 2 copies, and I have a fax, a Microsoft Print to PDF, a Microsoft XPS, a Send to OneNote, and a Snagit 12. These are software devices that allow me to, under the print function, allow me to do different software things, and we'll take a look at those. This is my actual physical printer that I have, and in Microsoft world this is called the printer. This software right here is called the printer. It's not the actual brother, it's called the print device. So CompTIA really doesn't use that kind of language, but Microsoft, that is a Microsoft terminology. This is the printer. The actual brother that's sitting 5 feet away from me right now is the print device. CompTIA will focus primarily on this interface, but I prefer another one. So I'm going to go back to Control Panel right up here, and I'm going to go to Small Icons, and I'm going to go to Administrative Tools. And I encourage you to start using this print interface. This is called Print Management, and this is actually the interface that you see on a server. So you might as well get used to this one. This is going to be more of what you deal with than anything else. And this interface really gives us a lot more under the hood view of what's going on with our printer. So let me expand it out a little bit. You can see the types of drivers, and we'll talk briefly about Type 3, Type 4 drivers. Type 4 drivers are the relatively new Windows 8 type design of drivers. They're better. Type 3 are a little bit older. We can see the driver name, the version. That's very important. The server name, in this case it's the desktop. How many jobs are in the queue for each printer, and then its status, and actually the printer name. So this is nice. This is far more for the IT pro. Here I can look at all my drivers, looks at are they 32-bit, 64-bit drivers. We can look at version numbers. We can look, are the drivers in shared, none, or in isolation? And we'll talk briefly about that. This is a very new feature, very, very helpful, very nice for the IT pro. Then we can look at the provider, and you can see I got 2 brothers, and most of the rest of them are Microsoft. Print processor, you can see the WinPrint is my print processor. Driver date and information path. Actually, we can see where the drivers are, and we'll go take a look at where drivers are in a minute. Printers with jobs, where we can actually see jobs going on if we had that. Then the printer server. This is nice because if you are on a real server, you can actually see all the various printer servers in one interface. This is nice. I can actually right mouse click and add in one interface all my print servers into one interface. So I have one interface to manage maybe 5 or 6 print servers in your environment. So it makes it one interface to manage a lot of print servers if you have that many. In this interface, you get a lot more control. You can see you could still do all the basic things. So I can click on printers, and I can add a printer, typically like you would normally. I can go to drivers, and I can change, are they in isolation? Are they in shared? Are they in none? So there's some nice features that you can only do in this administrative console. This is my printers and devices on my desktop at work. So you can see I have a lot more stuff hooked up, and you can see that it shows me a lot of other stuff besides printers. You can see I have quite a few printers. I have a label writer, a fax, a Microsoft Print to PDF, an XPS printer. These are all, we're going to talk about these in a minute. This is actually my We have a Samsung color printer, a couple printers that I can use. And notice that I've got one that's checked with green. That means it's default. When I go to an application and I print without any modification as to what I print to, it will always default to this printer. If I decide I want the color printer as default, I right mouse click and I can set it as default. And you can see the green check mark changes right there. In the world of printer drivers, there is basically PCL, which is a trademark of Hewlett-Packard, and it is a common printing language. It's probably one of the most common printing languages that you'll see with printer drivers. The pros of PCL drivers are fast printing process, widely supported in many different operating systems platforms. Some of the cons to PCL drivers are the same print job on two different printers may vary slightly. Quality of graphics is dependent on the print device. PostScript is another popular printer language, and it's really a programming language. It was very popular with the Apple because it produced very high quality graphics, very predictable color. PostScript is device independent, so you can print on many devices and you get a consistent output. So some of the pros on PostScript is graphical objects are often more detailed. The same print file should print identically on two or more different print devices. Some of the cons to PostScript, print process can be slow and it's not as found on as many platforms as PCL. So PCL is a little bit more popular. Print file and memory requirements are larger with PostScript. When we look at what makes up a printer driver, it's made up primarily of DLLs. It also has Windows configuration files, it has data files, it'll have XML files, it'll have CAT files, we call security catalogs. It'll have fonts and help files. We'll take a look at this as we look at drivers. Prior to Windows 8, independent hardware vendor such as Epson, Okidata, Kerasiamida, HP, this was the architecture for developing a driver. And you can see that in the blue, all of the blue areas was where the independent hardware vendor had to produce his driver. He had to produce quite a bit of what made it to print. That changed with Windows 8. So this is now called a version 4 driver. This is Windows 8 and above. And you can see the blue areas are much smaller. There's much less for Epson to have to create in order to print in Windows 8 as compared to Windows 7. So using a version 3 driver versus a version 4 driver, it made it much easier for hardware developers to develop their drivers much easier under the Windows 8, 8.1, and 10 platform. Another nice feature was an administrator can choose to share a driver so that the driver runs in a process that is shared with other printer drivers but is separate from the spooler. This is in case the printer driver wants to lock up the spooler. Another way, there's an isolated form of running the driver, and this runs the driver in a process that is separate from the spooler process and is not shared with any printer drivers. That keeps that printer separated, printer driver and all of its threads separate from everybody else. So if you have a printer driver that's buggy, that's causing you grief, you can isolate it and keep it from locking up the spooler and other printer drivers. And with none, you just run the driver in the spooler process. In order to support just such a huge variety of printers, Microsoft has come up with a print format that allows it to turn in any printable software, Excel, PowerPoint, Word, or any other application that needs to print documents. It uses an XPS format to do that. Let's take a look at XPS. XPS is based on an open XML file system. In other words, managing a document or taking a document and turning it into a file so that it maintains its color, its layout, its all the elements, its fonts. Basically, it's a structured document format consisting of structured XML. It allows vector graphics so that it can resize very well. It uses zip archive so that it can be compressed. It also has digital rights management. So XPS is a very popular with Microsoft system of converting files into a certain format, and then you get a consistent print. So let's take a look. I'm running Chrome right now, and I'm in a blog for Windows 8. I'm going to right mouse click, and I'm going to print this web page, and I'm going to choose my printer as print to XPS, sorry about that. And we're going to use that printer to print this document. And you can see it shows me the web page in a very consistent, I have color, I have very good font detail, the layout is relatively accurate to the web page. This looks just like a PDF file. So originally when Microsoft really moved its printing model to an XPS system, some were calling XPS the PDF killer. We would no longer use PDF. That has not happened. But it is how all of its documents, whenever you print a Word document, whenever you print a PowerPoint document, it uses the XPS format system to accurately convert the document, the PowerPoint, the graphic, the spreadsheet, into a printable format that is extremely good. You can see it's very accurate. This is actually the blog page, and you can see it gives you a very, very nice, well done layout of the web page. Now this is very similar to PDF, so I'm going to cancel this, and I'm going to do the same thing. This time we'll use PDF. I'm going to print. Instead, I'm going to change my printer to Microsoft's print to PDF, and you'll see a lot of the same thing. I get a very accurate rendition of the web page into a print format. The color, the graphics, the layout, everything looks very well done. It does a very good job of taking information that you want to print, convert it into a format which is printable. And here you can see we're using PDF, and you can see XPS does as good a job as PDF in doing that. XPS is Windows 8, Windows 8.1, and Windows 10 method of printing documents. So that's very important. So these printers here, Microsoft's print to PDF, always take a document, a web page, and print it to PDF files. XPS prints to files. So if I want to take a web page, a Word document, I can print it to an XPS file, and I can open it up in an XPS viewer. So those both the ability to print to XPS and to view XPS are built into the Windows ecosystem. Let's go back. I'm going to right mouse click in Chrome and print it again, and this time I'm going to use XPS, and we're going to save it as a file, and then we'll take a look at it. So there it is. I'm going to go ahead and print. It will prompt me as to where to put this file, and I'm just going to put it on my desktop, and we'll call this test, and it's going to save it in the OXPS extension, and it's going to put that new file on my desktop, and it looks like this. And I'm going to move my screen a little bit so you can see it, and there it is right here. If I right mouse click, I can open it, and this opens up an XPS viewer. Notice on my XPS viewer, I can open this document, go to test, and open it up in my XPS viewer, which is an application provided to you by Microsoft. And you can see I can see it, and I can do things like rights management, I can print it, etc. So it's very similar to a PDF environment, but be aware that this is the format that that is used extensively by Microsoft to print documents. Let's take a look at a printer that I have at home. This is a Brother. It's an 8150 and it's on the network. And you'll notice I have two icons in my printer devices GUI. This one, I was using the same driver for both of these printers, the same printer, going to the same device sitting about 5 feet away. But look at this one. This one is actually the brother driver. So I'm going to open this up. And you can see immediately I have this rich interface. I have solutions, online registration. This is the printer driver that was designed by Brother, and you can see it gives me this very, very colorful, rich interface to manage my Brother. Now let's go take a look at this one. So this is the same, this is another printer. This is the software interface to the exact same printer. So here's a side-by-side comparison of this is a software interface to my Brother using the rich driver that's provided by Brother. And over here, I used a generic PCL Class 6. This is a PCL printer control language, HP language driver that is version 6. And notice the difference between the interface. This is full-featured. I see a lot of functionality. I have a lot more options. It's a more richer interface than this one here. This is provided by Microsoft, and you can see it gives me the basic functionality of the printer, but not the richness, the feature set, the functionality that we see with the Brother driver. This is very important. When you use a Microsoft driver, it's not that it won't work. It probably will print just fine, but you'll miss out on a lot of feature sets that you'll get when you download the vendor's driver. So here's a classic example of a generic Microsoft driver for the same printer, and then the Brother driver, much richer, a lot more options, a lot more features with this driver. So that's very important. The vendor driver is usually the better driver when you want to print. We can go to the advanced section of this printer, and we can go look for a new driver, and we're just going to click through the wizard. I could go to Windows Update and see if there is a Microsoft approved driver. I could go to the manufacturer, which is Brother, and I can scroll through the many different types of drivers. This is the one I chose. Notice there's a PostScript, a PS class driver, so I could install a PostScript driver. Let's go ahead and do that, and we'll finish. And this is now a PostScript driver. Not a lot of change in terms of what it can do, but this will be using a PostScript driver rather than a PCL driver. Now going to Brother to take a look at drivers, you can see this first one is full driver and software package. This would only be used for select enterprise users and of course home users. This allows them to install all the bells and whistles for their printer. Here it says printer driver and scanner for local connection. This is where you're just going to install the driver. That's it. Just enough functionality to make it work. And it's Brother's driver, so you'll get a lot of the functionality. If you're a user and you're only familiar with the printer wizard, they have a driver that includes some more user-friendly type of interface. Down here we have PostScript. So if you need PostScript for the Brother, you download that driver, and then they have XML. This is the XML paper specification for XPS. So this is if you need that type of driver. Then they have other utilities and features. They even have an uninstall tool, which is extremely nice. Then they have a firmware update that allows you to update your firmware on your printer. So this is very typical of your drivers and which ones you download. Let me go quickly through the printer interface. This is the name of the printer. You can change that. Here you could put its location. Let's say it's on the 3rd floor. You could put comments in here. You could also see the feature set. You can see it's double-sided. It's staples. Nope. Speed is not indicated. No color. Maximum resolution 600 dpi. You could set up preferences, and we won't go into all of that, but you can set up. There's a whole lot in printing, and it just takes time for you to go through and learn a little bit. Here is sharing. I can click on this, and now my desktop actually becomes a printer server. It shares the printer to the rest of the people on the network. This says render the print job on the client computer. If you're going to print to my desktop, we need you to render the print jobs on your PC. Ports, this is how I'm connected to my Windows operating system. These are advanced things. I can share it, I can make the printer available at certain times. I can give the printer a certain priority. Here is the driver area where I can change spooling features. You can just take a look. It's good for you to walk through and take a look at some of these features. Security is very important for you to get comfortable with it. This is how you secure and manage printers. Take some time and learn this dialog box so you're comfortable with what you see. Let's open up a few. I've downloaded a few printer drivers, and I'm going to open them up with one of my favorite utilities called 7-zip. These are all exe files. You can see most of these are HPs. I think one of them's a brother. Anyway, these are all self-extracting executables. What does that mean? Well, a printer driver is full of files and folders and DLLs, and there's a lot that has to be done to install a printer driver. We have to edit the registry. We have to put files in a certain location. We have to do many things in order to get a printer driver installed. So this executable simply takes all those files necessary to run that printer, put them in a single file format, compress them so it's easy for you to download, and then when you double click this executable, it self-extracts. So I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to right mouse click. I'm going to use a utility that I've installed called 7-zip, and I'm going to extract the files right here in this download folder. So I'm going to say OK, and it's going to take all those files in that exe, open them up, and put them in a folder. And that's what we did. We took this file, we extracted everything, and we actually uncompressed it and put it in that file. So now we can actually open this driver up and take a look at it. So there you can see there's a setup file here that we're going to use to set up. I'm going to come back here to the driver. It looks like a PostScript. This is GDI with 32 and 64-bit. Here's your cat files. These are your cryptographic files that sign the driver. So that's what those are. You can see we've got i386, 64-bit. So these are probably all DLL files that make up the print driver. Remember, DLLs are a major portion of what makes up a printer driver. These are the 64-bit DLLs. I'm going to come back here. These are probably the 32-bit DLLs right here. So we got a 64-bit installer, a 32-bit and 64-bit installer. Now I don't know what all these files are. Some of them are language. You can see Deutsches and English and French, and so some of these are language files. Some of these are going to be fonts. But notice this INF. This is always a very important. I'm going to actually open it with Notepad, and I'm going to let you take. INFs are always very important with drivers. So I'm going to take this INF and open it up. And basically your INF file is your menu. It is read by the setup utility, and it explains everything about this set of files that you need to install. It tells you the manufacturer, the driver information. It gives you where the signed file is at. It gives you the version information. This is basically used by the setup utility to make sure that we copy files to certain locations, that we edit the registry properly, that everything is done in order. And so you can see files are compressed and put in a certain location. So the INF is critical to installing drivers. That is the purpose of the INF. So when you launch a printer wizard, it's looking for an INF file. That's going to be very important. Let's take a look at another driver. I have unzipped or 7-zipped this particular, I'm sorry, this one right here, this is a HP driver. This is simply a driver only. This is typically for a server or a enterprise desktop. Again, it unzipped it into a folder. Open it up and you can see the DLLs. Remember, that's primarily what a driver is. The SYS are typically very, very critical drivers to the actual hardware. The CAT files are the cryptographic files that are used for signing the drivers. And you can see CAB files are just built into this. These are for storing other files that are needed. Here's the driver area. And I'm just clicking them open so you can take a look. So you can see SYS and the DLLs. These are the various components that make up a driver. Now, again, very, very important. See these INF? These are what the setup wizard needs to see. Typically, when you install a driver, it is looking for the INF file. This is what, notice when I right mouse click on INF, I get an unusual option here. It's called install. You don't see that when I click a CAT file. Notice that install feature is not there because Windows understands that an INF is part of an installation. So INF is very, very important. And when you're doing the printer wizard, it is looking for that INF. Here's another one. So be aware of that. It's very helpful if you understand that. Another new feature is in Microsoft's website. If you're having trouble with printer issues, notice I'm on the Fix Printer Problems page, and I just typed in printer problems with Windows 10. You can download a troubleshooter tool, and I'll show you what it looks like. It looks like this. It's a Printer Diagnostics 10.diag cab. When I double click it, notice it gives me the troubleshooting and help prevent computer problems. This is dealing with printers. I can choose Windows Network Diagnostics, hardware and devices, and printers. I'm going to choose that one and go next. And it will begin the process of looking at all the attached printers. And I can choose one and it will begin the problem of troubleshooting. And it really looks at issues. So this is another nice tool for troubleshooting. It can help you find out what possibly is the problem with your